Next man up, 102.5 The Game. Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier sitting in for Jake Lyman alongside Brandon Bigsby behind the glass. Wrapping up the week on a Friday, a loaded show. Mike Organ in at 11. We'll have Mike Jacobs at 9:45. And Forever Titans wide receiver Chris Sanders at 10:30. What a week of sports. Got the NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs. Baseball is in full swing. I mean, it can't get any better than this, can it, Brandon Bigsby?
It really can't. And it's funny because we always hear how this is sort of the dead period of the sports year, but there's still so much going on with the playoffs and with offseason talk, which I think has honestly become so entertaining nowadays to where it fills in that part of the calendar pretty darn well. You obviously have soccer going on and so many other things. There's really no slow time in sports anymore. And it makes our job so much more fun than what it already is.
Indeed, absolutely. Talking about, the NFL and the offseason talk and so forth. There is a conversation we'll get into later on this hour about Carnell Tate, and it will kind of linger throughout the show of, kind of validating why the Titans chose Carnell Tate at number 4. I know Titans fans are still getting over the 4th overall pick, but let me just tell you, from the information you're going to hear later on, you will kind of ease and suffice those little bits of pain for being the top overall wide receiver picked in the franchise's history. But yeah, you're right. NFL offseason talk. There was the news yesterday, the Indianapolis Colts cutting ties with their DB Moore. So that's something interesting. Maybe the Titans have their eye on him. But overall, this is what we got going on for the day. Like I said, Mike Organ will be here at 11. But yeah, we want to hear from you. Call or text the Wilson County Hyundai phone and text line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai, 615-737-1025. Brandon, I guess we'll start with a little bit of news yesterday when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts. Just kind of making the news in the rounds of, parting ways for the most part. It just seems like this is the right move for both parties. And could that mean a potential option for the Tennessee Titans?
I think it's a possibility. And, it's funny that you bring this up because yesterday it was Connor Newton, TD. They were talking about the Titans corners a bit. And when you just kind of look at the overall state of that room, God forbid there's an injury, things get pretty bleak outside of the top 3. You bring in Alontae Taylor, you bring in Cordell Flatt. Those guys are solid, but once you kind of go down further down the depth chart, the options start to diminish a bit. And if you can bring in a guy like Kenny Moore, who is a former Pro Bowler, is a veteran, is familiar with the division on a reasonable contract, granted he is primarily a slot corner, and that is where you probably would want to have Cordell Flatt at, I think it could help raise the floor of a room that probably could use that extra option because, again, injuries happen in the NFL, and I just don't know how confident I would feel if the Titans were to suffer an injury or two, how liable that corner room would be in terms of being consistent and being able to produce.
Yeah, Kenny Moore was an undrafted player back in 2017 out of Valdosta State. Has made a really good, career out of his with Indianapolis, earning a total of $57.7 million throughout his career. But you wonder if the Titans can kind of get a team-friendly deal. Roughly, the Titans are still within $60-ish million, give or take. So it makes you wonder, is there a team-friendly deal in the cards in that point? I mean, you'd say roughly last year he made $8.4 million. You would say at least half of that would be something to look at for the Titans. I mean, that's just something that you don't, invest too much in because, again, he is one of those veteran players that has just been there for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think realistically, if you're talking about the potential of Kenny Moore coming to Tennessee, it's on a 1-year deal. It's on a reasonable salary. I don't think that either side probably would want to lock anything in long term. It's very rare that we see contracts for more than 1 or maybe 2 years once you get past that initial couple of weeks of free agency. So whatever it is, it would be a low risk deal that would be for just this one season to see if the fit is there and if it makes sense. But if you're a Titans, why not potentially kick around on that? I think that makes sense to do, even if Kenny Moore is a guy that is at 30 and he does primarily play that slot spot. Again, the more depth and the more options that you can have, especially at that corner position, the better. And it's a veteran that has proven, somebody that knows the league, that you can come in and rely on the minute he steps onto the field.
Yeah, and again, you're not relying on a guy like Kenny Moore to be your every down kind of DB in the slot. That's a guy you can kind of rotate into the defense. Again, you're coming into a defense with the potential of Robert Saleh maybe coaching that guy down the line, depending on. And I believe didn't Gus Bradley spend a couple years with Kenny Moore as well in Indianapolis?
I believe he did early 2020s.
Yeah, so then there's a little bit of some reunion history there between Kenny Moore and Gus Bradley. That'd be interesting to have on a Titans defense. But you look at just the rotation of what the Titans have on defense right now, and it's just, that was one problem, I guess you could say, last season for the Tennessee Titans, and that was just the lack of corner depth, the also lack of secondary depth in general. I mean, you look at, the secondary right now, you have Amani Hooker, Kendall Brooks, like you just mentioned, Cordell Flott, Alontae Taylor. But you wonder about Marcus Harris. The Titans are real high on him coming out of last season. Another, late round talent in the 6th round that has turned into being a really good player for them. So you wonder what he can do as that nickel corner as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, you can have a healthy rotation between Harris and Moore if that is the case.
Yeah, and you kind of get the sense that the Titans really like Marcus Harris a lot. And I thought that especially towards the end of the year, as he started to kind of gain trust and gain reps and opportunity, he proved himself to be a relatively reliable corner for a guy that was a 5th or 6th round pick. There wasn't really a whole lot of expectation for him coming into the season. I thought that he showed up and did pretty well. He was primarily a guy that was seen as a special teamer, end of the depth chart. And when he actually did get the chance to go out and play, I thought that he was somebody that proved that he could maybe be your 3rd or 4th corner in due time. And now you bring him into this Robert Saleh defense, and you get him coaches that very clearly believe in him and want to pour into him. I think that I can see the vision of Marcus Harris being a piece that the Titans believe in and want to build around. But it doesn't mean that you can't bring in a veteran as well that has a proven track record. And as you mentioned, may not be somebody that is a stalwart within the defense and is out there every single snap, but a very steady, reliable, rotational piece, which you see within that corner position in the slot very often, especially in the modern NFL.
Yeah, obviously these players are not the exact same, but just in comparison of who was previously on the Titans roster, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., a 5th round pick by the Titans at the time in 2024. You look at Marcus Harris, a 2025 6th round pick. Again, different rounds, but again, they're late round players that you're seeing production out of, and the Titans got, enough production out of Brownlee to trade him off to New York. But you look at Marcus Harris, I think that's the same type of value you're looking at for a guy on the defensive side of the football. And if they can somehow still supplement and grab guys in free agency to just help out before the season begins, I think it's a home run.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, it's one of those things to where in the NFL, injuries are going to happen, things are going to happen, and you just really want to have that depth. The deeper that your room can be, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that when you have a coach in Robert Saleh who hangs his hat on defense, he is going to want as much of that depth as possible, and we've seen them slowly but surely build that up, especially on the defensive front. I think that has a lot to do with why they went and picked Keldrick Falk, because he may not be a guy that immediately comes in and starts as an every down player, but he'll play a role and he'll see the field. The more that you can build that up at every position on the field, the better your team is going to be. And if there is a spot on defense specifically where the Titans probably are still trying to kind of find themselves and find that identity, and I think that that's going to take some time because there are a lot of new faces in that corner room, it would be there.
Yeah, it really would. And you mentioned the interior line there, talking about Keldrick Falk. Well, edge, that is. Keldrick Falk, now mentioning John Franklin Myers, Jeffrey Simmons, Jackie Marshall. I'm high on Jackie Marshall as one of those draft picks that they got out of Baylor. I think that's a guy that brings that, size that they need in the interior line. Again, another day 3 pick in the 6th round. I mean, 6'3", 306, brings that extra versatility from the inside of the defensive line, is able to kind of get past the, guards and tackles, or just disrupt that to where it can cause maybe a potential double team at one point. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to be double teaming Jeffrey Simmons, but you look at it from that perspective of, when the Titans had Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry, Danico Autry was a game record because everybody was kind of double teaming on Jeffrey Simmons. So you wonder if that is the combination you can kind of get out of those two guys. And again, Robert Saleh is one of the guys that likes to do a lot of stunts, a lot of overlapping A to B gap type stunts. So that's something you got to keep your eye on. But I'm really high on a guy like Jackie Marshall out of Baylor.
Yeah, and it's funny because he kind of fits that stereotypical prototype of what Robert Saleh likes in these interior defensive linemen. Maybe not a huge mauler like a Tavondre Sweat, who we saw them trade to the New York Jets a few months ago,
Sure.
but somebody that not only has plenty of size, but is really athletic in the trenches. And that is what you want, is somebody that is going to be able to get back in the backfield and do it quickly. We get so enamored, I feel like, especially with that defensive tackle position, with the size. You need guys that are going to be able to get back there and get there in a hurry, because the speed of the game has picked up so much. These running backs are so different than what they used to be, where a lot of them aren't even necessarily between the tackles runners anymore. They're doing pitches and screens to the outside more times than not. So I think that Jackie Marshall could be a guy that, even if he may not immediately see a ton of reps, he could see a Marcus Harris type of jump, obviously different position, but someone that when you're looking at this team in December, all of a sudden, Jackie Marshall isn't just on the field more, but you're noticing him a little bit, making plays in the backfield, being in on some of those game tackles, and helping this defense, again, sure up and create more of that depth that they need. And you mentioned something too, Nick, that I think is very interesting. You mentioned Danico Autry. I think that's the exact role that they see in Keldrick Falk, a guy that can kick inside, can kick outside, can play edge, can line up to next to Jeffrey Simmons, depending on the package. He's a versatile piece, and he's somebody that is a freak athlete, doesn't have the history of collecting sacks, but he gets to the backfield and he impacts plays. And when you put that next to a Jeffrey Simmons, next to a John Franklin Myers, next to a Jermaine Johnson, who I think a lot of us have forgotten about, was a very good player before the injury with the Jets and played under Robert Saleh, had his best years with Robert Saleh, all of a sudden, this front four looks something really serious in the AFC South.
It really does. And just mentioning Danico Autry, and then you have Keldrick Falk. Keldrick Falk has that bull rushing mentality to his game. Sure, the sacks are not high up there, but again, a game wrecker, like you mentioned. That's something that you got to keep an eye on going forward. There was something you mentioned about size. And I'm not talking about on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball. There's a specific player that we kind of prefaced at the beginning of the show, and that's Carnell Tate. And I think it's time to have the conversation of, did the Titans really need a wide receiver in Carnell Tate that high in the draft? We'll get to more of that on Next Man Up right here on 102.5 The Game. Back here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier, Brandon Bigsby behind the glass here at the Busy Bee Studios. The Nashville Sounds take on Louisville this evening. The first pitch is at 6:15 p.m. Catch all the action on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Family Leisure and Social Cantina. Louisville Bats are the AAA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds, which are on a little bit of a downslope right now in Major League Baseball. They the other night were going into extra innings with the Cubs and ended up losing. So, I mean, this is up and down season for the Reds, but, you know, the Bats are kind of clicking a little bit. But the Nashville Sounds last night getting a win, and one of the wins in their doubleheader, so good for them. We continue here on Next Man Up, kind of discussing the Titans, talking the offensive side of the football, and Carnell Tate. How badly did the Tennessee Titans need a guy like Carnell Tate? Well, before we get to Carnell Tate, we got to mention a guy that has just been handed over from, not really handed over, but joining the staff, and that's Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll being one of the integral parts to the development of Josh Allen, along with a few others. You could say Jackson Dart. You could say, you know, guys like Saquon Barkley that have been, you know, a key piece to those offenses where he's been previously with Buffalo and New York, the Giants, that is. And there's one specific, you know, statistic average out there that it kind of struck a chord with me, and that is the A-dot type receiver. And that A-dot receiver in this case would be Carnell Tate. But to get to that, we have to look at some numbers before Carnell Tate was drafted to the Tennessee Titans and before Brian Daboll was essentially here in Nashville. And that kind of dates back a little bit to Buffalo and then into New York. Buffalo, he kind of always had the, you could say, Stephon Diggs to open up as that A-dot guy. And again, to go back to understanding what an A-dot receiver is, it's the average depth of target and air yards calculated. So basically, the amount of yards a wide receiver can cover without having the ball in his hands. And so it's a little different between the yak yards. Yak yards, you're collecting the ball, and then it's the yards after the catch. So that's essentially what yak is, the acronym. But no, I think it's a very interesting point to bring up a A-dot receiver in this situation, because Carnell Tate is that. Again, a guy that only had, 4 drops in his career with Ohio State. I don't think he had any drops last season. I think it's an interesting, I'd say, average to bring up because of that point of not dropping that many balls and the fact that he's in contested catch situations. That's something that you need to be really good at in the NFL at the next level, converting from college to the pros, is those contested catches.
Absolutely. And I think, too, just tying that together with the Titans and their situation specifically, if you could mock up an ideal young receiver to pair with a quarterback like Cam Ward, it is that A-dot guy like Carnell Tate, who you know has the length, who you know is going to be able to go up, grab the ball with 2 hands, and come down with it. There were few receivers in all of college football during Carnell Tate's 3 years that were more reliable than him when he got those opportunities. So Cam Ward, who we know is a guy that loves to sling it. He likes to go up to that big wide receiver and give him a chance. That's why we saw Alec Iomanner and him have such a rapport early on in the season, because Alec Iomanner is one of those guys where he's able to go up sky high, grab that ball, and come down with it. You now get a guy in Carnell Tate who not only can do that, but he can separate. He's a great route runner. And he is somebody that when Cam Ward needs that guy that he can rely on to say, okay, who's going to be open enough to where I can give them the ball and they can make a play? And that is what Carnell Tate is able to do. And I love that you pulled out that A-dot stat, because it is such a good representation of who is able to do that at an effective level and make those big plays. It isn't just, oh, well, this guy ran a 4.3 40 at the combine. And that's been one of the knocks to Carnell Tate, is that he's slow because he ran a 4.53. That's not slow at all. You want to know who else ran a 4.53? Mike Evans. And if you can get a version of Mike Evans, not saying that him and Carnell Tate will be the same player, but I think the Titans would have happily taken a guy like that. Devontae Adams ran a 4.56. T. Higgins, who Carnell Tate has often been compared to, ran a 4.54. So it goes to show you that Carnell Tate has that ability to get open. And when he does get that opportunity, a guy like Cam Ward is going to feed him, and he is going to be able to come down with the ball and make a play.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Mike Evans' name in this conversation, because he is that, I'd say, the godfather of the A-dot stat in a roundabout way. You look at him in Tampa Bay, a guy minus last season had 1,000 yards receiving every single year he was in the league. I think that's a huge piece to kind of look at. And again, the I'd say baseline numbers for a guy like Carnell Tate. Again, I'm still in the 850 range. I'm not trying to put too much of a high ceiling on him, but let's kind of dive into the A-dot, statistical averages real quick. You mentioned Alec Iomanner just a second ago with the Tennessee Titans. And again, there are a few other players players on this wide receiver core for the Titans last season that, again, let's remind ourselves, this was a year without a Robert Saleh, without a Brian Daboll. This was a Brian Callahan mixed with a, mixture of different, coaches on this staff that just didn't pan out well. So again, looking at a guy like Chimdike, who was more of your special teams player, his ADOT was 8.09. And then again, to Alec Iomanner, 12.65. I looked up as well, the average in the NFL for ADOT receivers to be like one of the tops is 15. 15 seems to be the max of the numbers, what you want to be at. Carnell Tate in college was a 14.8. So if that goes to show you how much the Titans really needed a guy like Carnell Tate at number 4, I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all stat to the reason why he was top of their board in the draft, but it's something that I think you need to keep a keen eye on when it comes to development of Cam Ward and the rest of this offense. And again, I now bring in Brian Daboll's name into all of this to circle it back is, when Daboll was introduced as the offensive coordinator here with the Tennessee Titans, somebody asked him, it may have been Corey Curtis or somebody else, about how he kind of not disguises his plays on offense, but how he approaches things. And it's just all about, I think I'd have to go back and find the audio, but it's all more about just how it's presented. It's not about how, for example, if you have Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot, he's going to probably run a drag over the middle. Again, that's probably getting your, wide receiver hurt in some aspects. But if you can find that open space, that's what I feel like Brian Daboll's offense succeeds so well in, is those short, quick passes to where you're able to get the yak yards. Now, when you integrate a guy that's a really good ADOT wide receiver in Carnell Tate that is able to just take up so much space. Again, I don't want to compare too many different names into this conversation, but, with Derrick Henry, when he was here in Nashville, you had to get him fed the ball a few times to get him really going. And I know that the knock on Carnell Tate is that 40 time, and I feel like people have to really push that aside. It's like a Derrick Henry at wide receiver. You got to get him going when you have to run the route or, just get open in some aspects. So to me, I have no issues with the speed at all. It's more about the contested catches. As long as you catch the football, that's all that matters. So for the fact that Carnell Tate's coming from college to the pros, I wonder what that average is going to be like. And again, you're in a very youthful offensive set with guys like Gunnar Helm, Cam Ward in this case. The backfield, you could just include Nick Singleton in that from Penn State. So there are a lot of different names, but a little bit more on the ADOT stat here from last season. It's hard to really look at the wide receiver room for the Titans because only 3 players played more than 10 games at that wide receiver position, according to the numbers I'm looking at here. Chimdike was a full 17, Alec Iomanner with 16, and Van Jefferson with 14. The rest of the list, it's kind of weird to say, is 7 for Lockett, 7 for Ridley, 6 for James Prochet, 2 for Kinsey, 2 for Restrepo, and 1 for Oliver. Obviously, some of those guys had injuries throughout the time, but you just look at James Prochet and Calvin Ridley. Ridley was 12.5. Prochet was 14.5. But again, that's a smaller sample size when it comes to the numbers of 7 games for Ridley, 6 for Prochet. So that's why I just kind of look at those top 3 in that list, and that's DK, Iomanner, and Jefferson. And something to really keep a keen eye on as well when you look at these numbers is Jefferson and DK, they're not your ADOT type receiver. They're your yak receivers that get the ball either from the hash marks to the sideline or over the middle. And that's why their numbers are a little bit lower. You look at Jefferson, 11.98. Again, the reason why his number is over more than Chimdike, obviously so, is because Chimdike took a lot more reps at the special teams positions on kickoff and punt return. So I think that's something to keep a good vantage point of.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the receivers from last season, because I think that if you were to just take a second to compare last season's receiving room and this season's, the depth that this team has now with Carnell Tate being added to it is so much more plentiful. I'm looking at it right now. You have Carnell Tate. He's going to be one of your outside receivers. You have Calvin Ridley, who will be on the opposite side, and Wan'Dale Robinson, who will be in the slot. Well, the 2 guys that we just talked about, Chimdike and Alec Iomanner, who were having to be heavily relied on to basically be wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 once Calvin Ridley went down with injury, those are guys that now can just come in and rotate. They don't have to carry that heavy load that they were forced to carry a season ago. And then if you go past them, KJ Osborne, who was signed as a free agent, who in the past has shown to be a formidable borderline starting wide receiver with Minnesota and with San Francisco for a little bit. And then you start talking about maybe guys that are borderline roster, Mason Kinsey, Xavier Restrepo, who I know a lot of Titans fans want to see get his chance. I'd be a little worried about him right now, admittedly, but you also have a guy, Tyron Montgomery, who is an undrafted free agent that people seem to be very excited about as a Division III prospect with a lot of size and traits that could maybe come in and break through the roster. Bryce Oliver, somebody who is stuck around and though did not get many opportunities last season due to injury, has shown that he is not just a very valuable player when he does get the chance, but is one of their better special teams players as well. So the overall room of the wide receiver position with the Titans not only is more complete, but you bring a guy like Carnell Tate into it, and it raises the opportunity for those other guys. How much more easier is Wan'Dale Robinson's job in the slot going to be now that Carnell Tate is with him? How much easier is Calvin Ridley, who came in with wide receiver 1 expectations? How much easier is his life now, coming off of an injury, coming into his age 30, age 31 season? Carnell Tate makes so much sense for those reasons because it makes everyone's life easier, but no one's life easier than the quarterback Cam Ward. And that is what's important for your young franchise guy that you're trying to see grow and you're trying to see develop and you're trying to put in the best situation possible.
Absolutely. We'll get into more of this, wide receiver talk in the next segment and kind of delve more into the Brian Daboll aspect of this, how each player might fit into his system, kind of revisiting some of those numbers from when he was in New York, including Wan'Dale Robinson, because he's a former New York Giant as well. This is all just kind of unfolding here right in front of us. So we'll get into more of that right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game.
Maybe that plane would never take off. Maybe that dust wouldn't fly the drop. Maybe that tumbleweed in me wouldn't leave every other sun.
I mean, how can you interrupt this, right? Incredible. I mean, I do my best not to, but incredible music return there, Brando. Love it, man.
I knew you'd appreciate this one.
You got to, right? Country music any day of the week, especially on a Friday. We're talking Titans here, right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Let's see here. Our offseason coverage is brought to you by Tennessee Brew Works, the official craft beer of football offseason coverage on 102.5 The Game. Raise a glass with Tennessee Brew Works, proud partner and official craft beer of the football season. All off-season coverage here on 102.5 The Game. Brandon Bigsby and Nick Frazier here on Next Man Up, discussing more about Brian Daboll's offense, trying to dissect it, see what it may look like this upcoming fall for the Tennessee Titans in their upcoming season. One thing that kind of struck a chord with me, Brandon, and it revolves around Carnell Tate, but not directly, and it's the slot receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm looking at his numbers last season, and again, when you have a guy like that has 386 yards on the yak yards, that is yards after catch, doesn't eclipse the top 25. It rounds out, the top 25 rounds out with Kyle Pitts, who again hasn't seen much production in Atlanta and signs the franchise tender there. I think it's like $15 million. So good for him. But that goes to show you a guy that's not used as much in I'd say more of a wide receiver, running back heavy offense in Atlanta. You wonder what that could look like for a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson here in Nashville, because coming off of a season to where, you're with a few solid players in New York and Darius Slayton, and you also had Jalen Hyatt, a former Tennessee Vol. Now you can say that's an A-dot guy when he was in college, not so much here in the NFL, but you have Malik Neighbors, who again was hurt at some point, only played 4 games. But Wan'Dale Robinson has a really good, sample size as to what you can really see out of him. The guy had 140 targets last season, 92 receptions, just over 1,000 yards receiving. And again, his A-dot again is lower because they used him more in that yak role. And I think that's what you're going to see with Brian Daboll in this offense this fall.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so interesting, because it's not often that you see a team hire an offensive coordinator and then sign a receiver, and that receiver was playing for that offensive coordinator as their head coach in the prior season. So the Titans kind of get a bit of a benefit there, because they know what they will more than likely get out of Wan'Dale Robinson, and probably have a clearer picture of what role they want to see out of Wan'Dale Robinson. And it's interesting because you saw the contract, I think it was a little bit over $80 million that he got paid. He was somebody that was a very steady presence for the Giants over the last 2 years. I know that a lot of that attention came last season because he became the wide receiver one when Malik Neighbors did go down with that knee injury. But he was a guy that even in 2024 was a very consistent, steady presence for the New York Giants, and gave them that option in the slot to get a quick catch and to be able to make a play with the ball in his hands. And again, that adds another dynamic to this Titans offense that they didn't previously have. And then you combine that with the fact that Brian Daboll has that picture of what Wan'Dale Robinson can be. He knows what the best and most productive version of Wan'Dale Robinson looks like. I think if you're Tennessee, you're really excited, because you know you're going to get a guy that not only can come in and produce immediately, but the learning curve for this offense and what they need out of him is going to be much shorter than maybe a guy like Calvin Ridley or a guy like Chimdike or Alec Iomanner, who are going to have to adjust to what Brian Daboll wants them to do.
Yeah, and let's kind of delve into the 2024 stats of the New York Giants real quick, because that was a season to where Malik Neighbors played 15 of those games. Wan'Dale Robinson played all 17, and then you had Darius Slayton who played 16 of those games. You wonder if, because here's the target value here. Malik Neighbors, obviously we all know he's a wide receiver one in New York. You try to equate that to a guy like Carnell Tate and or maybe a Calvin Ridley. I mean, right now, Neighbors in 2024 had 170 targets. Wan'Dale Robinson had 140. You wonder where the production lies this upcoming fall. Is it going to be more evenly distributed with a Chimdike, Alec Iomanner, Calvin Ridley, or is it going to be more top-heavy in a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson and Carnell Tate? And then you supplement that a little bit with a guy like Calvin Ridley whenever he's open. Because to me, personally, what my vibe is that it's going to be Carnell Tate and Wan'Dale Robinson, and there's going to be teams that are going to be game planning for a guy like Calvin Ridley, who, again, comes back on a team-friendly deal, and you try to, facilitate him in the offense.
Yeah, and, you mentioned the reference with those 2024 stats. Here's something interesting. Obviously, last season was his first career 1,000-yard season. In 2024, it was 699. But that's not what catches my attention. I look at the targets. He had 140 targets in both of those seasons, that same exact number. And there was only a difference of one catch, 93 in 2024 and 92 in 2025. So I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that, okay, maybe he won't get to that 1,000 yard mark because, again, a lot of the volume was going to him with that Malik Neighbors injury, and there wasn't really a whole lot of options outside of Wan'Dale Robinson. But I don't think it's maybe unreasonable to say that he could go somewhere in between the middle of that 699 and that 1,000 if he can get you 700 to 800 yards. And I think you happily take that if you're a Titans because you do have Carnell Tate and you do have Calvin Ridley and Jim Dike and Alec Iomatter. This might not be a team where you see a receiver with 13 or 1,400 yards, but you see multiple with over 500. And last season, there was only one player that got over 500 yards, and it wasn't even a receiver. It was Chigakonkwo. So a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson who can come in, be reliable, and obviously can handle a pretty significant load of targets, getting 140 in each of the last 2 years. I think you're really excited about that because you know that Brian Daboll knows how to use him. And again, he knows what the best version of Wan'Dale Robinson looks like.
Bingo. You said that right there. How Brian Daboll uses him and is able to get the best out of him. And to me, seeing that, I'm right there on the same wavelength as you, Brandon, is that if when Malik Neighbors goes down, you have to evolve your offense. That immediately makes Wan'Dale Robinson your wide receiver one. And again, you're still opening up opportunities for guys like Darius Slayton, who are more one of the veteran wide receivers. But again, Wan'Dale Robinson, who has that breakaway speed on those yak yards. And again, the yak yards only increased by just a little bit, 358 in 24 to 386 in 2025. And that's because more than likely you go back and watch the tape. Brian Daboll's trying to open up space down the field for a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, not to get him over the middle. That's more for guys like Isaiah Hodges or even some cases Jalen Wright, going from the hash marks out to the side. So that's something to keep an eye on. But overall, I thought this was just something that we'll get more into this when Mike Organ gets here in the third hour or so. But I just think it's very interesting how we're kind of seeing a little bit of the numbers from previous seasons and how that may evolve into this fall under Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. And also, too, more cracks at the offensive bat. That I think that gives a better look at what the defense might bring as well. Because if more opportunities the defense gets to the quarterback, the more opportunities you'll have for Brian Daboll's offense to really flourish and, score more points. And I think that's something a lot of Titans fans want to see is more touchdowns, especially here in Nashville.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this entire conversation around the Titans and this, kind of rebuild that they're undergoing with Robert Saleh so interesting, because all the talk is how Robert Saleh is a defensive mastermind. And I think that Robert Saleh's defense is going to be a significant improvement over what the Titans have seen over the last few years. Now, we don't know what the ceiling of that looks like, and that's okay. But I do think that the floor, you can say pretty confidently with this defense, is going to be much higher. And I thought that last season, the defense under Denard Wilson wasn't necessarily poor. It's just that they were forced to stay on the field so often because the offense could not sustain drives. And on top of that, it would lead to a lot of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, to where the offense on the other side would be able to go down, make a play, and keep them out on the field. I don't think you're going to see that as often. And Nick, I think you make a great point. Because of that, that gives your offense more cracks at the bat. That gives Cam Ward and Carnell Tate and Wan'Dale Robinson and Tony Pollard and these impact players that you expect to go out and make plays and put points on the board. It gives them more opportunities to do that because the offense can't get out on the field if the defense can't get off of it.
Absolutely. And talking about one team that's improving on the football field, there's another team that improved this past offseason, is the best in the Eastern Conference. That's Nashville SC. And we'll talk to General Manager and President of Soccer Operations, Mike Jacobs, here on the other side, right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game.
I was slipping them Fridays, sucking on a glass of wine.
Great tune coming back here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier, alongside Brandon Bigsby behind the glass. And now joining us is Nashville SC General Manager and President of Soccer Operations, Mike Jacobs. Mike, how you doing this afternoon? Or morning,
Great, Nick. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks.
All good.
My schedule is just all over the place, but yeah, we're in the morning. Goodness gracious. Nashville SC having a really good start to the MLS season. Unfortunate coming up short in the semifinals against Tigres, but what is your overall assessment so far of this club that you've constructed for the roster?
I sent a message out both to our players and our staff just yesterday to kind of reflect back on not only this week, but the start of the season. And, you know, as a competitor, I mean, if you're not upset when you lose, you're knocked out of a tournament, you know, something's probably wrong with you. So I think, you know, we were all pretty dejected and disappointed, you know, leaving Monterrey on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. But, you know, you look back on the whole experience. I mean, you know, there's a small number of teams in Major League Soccer history that have advanced to the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals, like ever, you know. So for us to do that is a tremendous achievement for our club, and you know, changed our profile not only like in the United States among fans and media, but you know, also all over North America. But the reality is, I mean, other than Vancouver last year, we are the only team in MLS history that has gone to the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals while also being in first place in our conference. You know, the reality is when you have so many games and it's a tight period of time, it's very difficult to kind of maneuver both. And, you know, it's not a coincidence. We've only had 1 year in our club's history we didn't make the playoffs. I don't think it's a coincidence that year also occurred, you know, the first time we played in CONCACAF Champions Cup. So, you know, when you think about that kind of congestion and how to manage both those things and to see how well the team's done, to feel really, really lucky. I think we've got a tremendous group of players and staff here.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there the CONCACAF Champions Cup, just the difficulty of roster construction. Obviously, when you go up against teams in, you know, other leagues like Liga MX with Tigres and Club America, they have a little bit more, you know, player acquisition, a little bit more to choose from in their player pool. When it comes to MLS teams, it seems like you're going up against a bit of a mountain. I guess for you as a guy that constructs the roster, you've kind of mentioned it just now, but how difficult is it to really grasp the true concept of it, to try to get the best of 11 out there, even past the best 11, but even on the bench?
Well, you know, our league has some different challenges and restrictions from the standpoint of having a salary cap and other roster restrictions compared to leagues like Liga MX. But, you know, for us, competing against teams of that ilk, like that level, you know, you have to have everything go right. You have to have not only all your key players healthy, you have to all be playing really well. And I think you saw it, you know, especially both legs this semifinal round against Tigres. They're an outstanding team and very worthy of being in the CCC final. They executed their game plan really, really well against us in both legs. Made it really hard for us to be able to generate scoring chances. And I think, you know, it's to be able to play at this kind of level and to be among the elite teams in North America, you've got to be on your game all the time. And we were kind of punished for it.
Yeah, you know, we've talked in you know, months past, along with not only you, but also BJ Callahan has even mentioned, you know, would you have young guys like Warren Madrigal, Reed Baker Whiting? I mean, this is one of the more younger teams in MLS. You look at Maxwell Belizzi. I mean, they're 23, 21-year-old players. And to have a coach like BJ Callahan, who's kind of known for developing that younger talent, how much has that helped not only your job, but just player development as a whole throughout the club?
Well, for us, when we first talked about trying to create like a club game model, that's not just like how we want to try to play on the field, but really it's kind of who we wanted to be, you know? So the idea of having younger players in our group, whether it's being able to kind of extend the life cycle of our team, you know, younger players obviously can be in your core longer, but also maybe increase the talent pool, potentially sell players on. You know, most clubs around the world, they want guys who are 20 years old, not 30 years old, you know? So once we decided to do that, then it came in trying to find a manager that they thought could do that. And really very quickly, you know, it became very clear that the best person that fit how we wanted to play and who we wanted to be was BJ. And, you know, he's just been so outstanding for us. I just can't say enough great things about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned transfers of other teams across, not only here in the North America, but also in Europe and elsewhere. The World Cup's on the horizon. It's one of the more popular transfer windows, the summer transfer window. When it comes to a young team like Nashville SC, I'm sure your phone line has to be buzzing from time to time, right?
Yeah, look at, you know, I get asked by someone earlier today about like how the summer window or World Cup can affect changes in your team. You know, the reality for us, I mean, you know, we try to get 10 months to a year ahead of what we're doing as far as our planning for our roster and acquisitions. It's not as simple as watch the guy on TV one day and say you want to try to sign him the next day. There's a lot that goes into the identification and the recruitment. But for us, I mean, I think, knowing that you have a world championship and, the biggest tournament in the world and having it here in the U.S., there's definitely opportunities presented to us now, maybe weren't presented before.
Yeah, and kind of just take the Nashville SC fans and the listeners behind the closed doors a little bit when it comes to roster construction. Obviously, with Nashville SC being in a salary cap league and also having certain, the U22 initiative spots, the DP spots, your hands kind of get tied a little bit because when you have fans saying, "Oh, we need more," but then you look at it and think, well, you kind of exercise the majority of those spots. How do you manage that as one of those guys that constructs the roster?
Look at the current roster restrictions they have right now, the certain regulations. We can have 6 players on discretionary spends, which means 3 designated players and 3 under 22s, or we can have 2 DPs and 4 U22s. What those players are, your designated players. You can offer them any amount of money, and they hit the salary cap for a fixed amount of money. And then you have your under 22s, players who are under the age of 22. You can have 3 players who are discretionary spends, where you can spend maybe more than the traditional amount of money you spend on a player. And they also have like a fixed roster destination, like a cap number. So those 6 players, 3, over 22 players, and 3 under 22 players, you can kind of pay them what you want or pay transfer fees what you want, and they hit the cap the same way it would Miami with Lionel Messi. But the reality is we only have so many guys like that, in your roster. So, we have to be very thoughtful about how we populate the rest of our roster to make sure it all fits.
Mike Jacobs is on the line with us here from Nashville SC, General Manager and President of Soccer Operations.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned Nashville SC being the first team ever in MLS history to not only make it to that Champions Cup semifinal, but to also be holding on to first place in the conference. Obviously, it's a little bit unique in soccer because you have multiple tournaments going on in the middle of your normal MLS season. As a GM, what are some of the things that you can learn about your team and about your roster as you're seeing your team make this run in some of these other tournaments, but also continuing to chase after that MLS trophy at the end of the year in December?
So often when we look at trying to put players together on a roster, it could be magnets on a board or names in an Excel spreadsheet. But, really, until you get them together in the same field, it's hard to see how cohesive they are. The idea, obviously, the difference between like fantasy football and maybe what we're doing is, in fantasy football, you're really trying to just collect players. You're just trying to just get as many guys as you can and, have certain stats. For us, because they have to play on the field together, we're trying to make sure they're cohesive. They fit together as pieces. Likes of Eddie Tagsett and Patrick Yazbek, how do they fit together as a partnership? Maxwell Waledzi and Jason Palacios is like a partnership, so maybe there's certain things you have to do together. And really the only way you can kind of do it is pressure test them, have them on the field together. And, we spend a lot of time looking at data and looking at video, meeting with players in person, talking to them. But until you have them together and until you can kind of pressure test them under rigid demands, you don't really know what you have. And when you saw this group play at the Azteca, one of the largest stadiums, one of those famous stadiums in the world, to be able to do that and to knock Club America off, to me, I feel it's kind of like watching Brian Schwacke last year in the U.S. Open Cup final against Austin. Under those demands, you're seeing someone do it at the highest of levels and in the most pressure-tested situation. If you can do it there, you can kind of do it anywhere. So for us, where it's still only 30% into this MLS regular season, we've got a chance to put these guys on the microscope, and I used that phrase before, pressure test them to see kind of what they're really all about.
Yeah, Mike, last one for me. When it comes to you talking about pressure testing players, I thought it was interesting. Previous games, I think it was Charlotte a couple Saturdays ago, Ahmed Qasim was asked a question about just the veteran leadership on the team, and he specifically mentioned Hani Mukhtar and being one of those players. Obviously, Hani was the first signing here with Nashville SC, but also to the point of him being that bigger brother figure and being the captain of the team. It just feels like that's somebody you can really take the initiative of being the true captain of a team like Nashville SC.
You look at someone like Ahmed. I mean, every player has a different adaptation period when they come from a different country, a different part of the world. It could even be someone even in the country coming from a different market. It takes everyone. Everyone's different as far as how quickly they can adapt. What things they need to help settle in. To have a leader like Hani, who does such a great job of integrating young players, integrating new players, it helps make the locker room more of a welcoming place. And I think when you have veteran leadership with guys like Hani, it just makes it easier for a lot of these young guys that you mentioned earlier that we're bringing in to kind of be able to adapt and settle in.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Jacobs, president of soccer operations, general manager of Nashville SC, joins us here this morning on Next Man Up. Mike, we appreciate the time. We'll see you guys tomorrow night, taking on DC United for Eddie Tagseth bobblehead night.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Appreciate it. Mike Jacobs, president of soccer operations and general manager of Nashville SC, joins us here on Next Man Up. Just this team is clicking on all cylinders heading into the semifinals of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and unfortunately they couldn't get past that because of Tigres. But minus that, they're back into MLS regular season, taking on DC United tomorrow night at 8:15 at Geodis Park. Again, Eddie Tagseth bobblehead night will be a fun one to go to. If you're there, reach out to me on Twitter, whatever, and I'll see if I can meet you somewhere. It'll be a fun game to watch. It doesn't look like they'll be with Sam Surridge, Yazbek, and Tagseth, so we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure what the injury status is on Tagseth, but Yazbek previously getting hurt in Monterey in that second leg of the Champions Cup. And once again, Sam Surridge still week to week on that lower back injury. So we'll see what happens there. And we'll get into more stuff on the other side in hour number 2 of Next Man Up on 102.5 The Game. Hour number 2 of Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier in for Jake Lyman today, alongside Brandon Bigsby. Just wrapped up conversation with Nashville Predators general manager and president of soccer operations, Mike Jacobs. Kind of delving in a little bit of the roster construction and just the overall, evolution of this club within the last season or so. And, this is a team that has really evolved under BJ Callahan. I think the system that he implements, again, this is something we kind of really touched on with Mike, but it's more of the, you have guys like Warren Madrigal, Sam Surridge, and Hani Mukhtar and Christian Espinoza. I think we all understand the Espinoza signing was probably one of the key signings to really, I guess, adding more quality in the attacking third for Nashville when it comes to just, goal opportunities, on goal opportunities. Warren Madrigal recently has been playing as that number 9 role when Sam Surridge is not in, because of injury. I think it's interesting because they're two separate players. Warren Madrigal is more of you have the ball at your feet, you're going to take the defender head on. Again, he can be pretty physical and scrappy, but again, that's where you kind of want Warren to be more of the back to goal. And that's why Sam is so beneficial in this case of the system, is that he's a tall, lengthy striker that is, your guy that kind of is in front of the goal for the most part inside the 18 and is able to just put a foot on the ball and it goes into the back of the net. His positional placement on the field is definitely top notch in the MLS. That's why he's one of the top goal scorers in the league right now, excuse me. But then you look at Warren Madrigal, he does a good enough job to be that supplemental number 9. And again, they have Wubens Pacius, who is a young number 9. He has the size and the stature of a guy like, Sam Surridge. But again, there's that youth aspect, that development aspect that still needs to grow as a player.
Yeah, and that's what makes Nashville SC so exciting, I think. It's because they are high flying and they are fun to watch and they are young. I mean, that was one of the takeaways, I think, when we were talking to Mike, is that he talked about that. This is a young team that is still growing, is still learning, and are becoming that peak version of themselves as professional athletes. And, I think that you talk about Madrigal, it's easy to forget that he's only 21 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, he just became legal to drink not that long ago. I mean, it's not been that long. And you bring in a guy like Surridge as well, who since coming here from being in the Premier League and being in the EFL Championship in England has been a very, very steady presence. And then obviously you have the guy that has been kind of the centerpiece for so long in Hani Mukhtar, who has just continued to be one of the best playmakers and goal scorers in all of MLS. The guy has had no fall off whatsoever in that time. So you do have some of that youth, but you also still have some of that experience. And experience doesn't just come in terms of age, but it comes from playing big matches. It comes from playing against these grown men overseas and in Europe that have that experience and are at a very, very high talent level that isn't far off, and in some cases even surpasses some of these teams that you're playing in the MLS. So it's very interesting, just the roster makeup that Nashville SC has, because they do have a lot of that youth, but at the same time, they're not just, the team that's young and dumb that's going to make mistakes either. So it's kind of an interesting balance, because they're young and they're learning, but also it doesn't always feel like they're as young as they are.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at from all the way from the back line, and it's just I keep using the word evolution, but it's an evolution of just how the players are developing. You go from Joe Willis last season, who was a huge piece into, just setting the standard for the goalkeeping, position. Now you have Brian Schwacke, and even Mike Jacobs mentioned in that US Open Cup run, how he developed as a player and how there were a lot of difficult tasks for him to develop as a young goalkeeper. You look at him now, the guy has 10 clean sheets in MLS play, which is incredible. I mean, across all competitions, I believe. And he's just been nothing but spectacular for this club. And to be fair, I've even mentioned this before, when Nashville SC, after the first leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, he is the sole reason why Nashville SC was down 1-0. I mean, obviously he's the goalkeeper, whatever. You keeping goals out of the net. I get all that. But there were a few kick saves that I thought were going to be put into the back of the net easy. The second effort you see from Brian Schwacke is definitely next level. And again, goes to his youth a little bit as well, for being only in his, early 20s. I think it's huge. Mid 20s, that is 24. And let's not forget too, the backup goalie for Nashville SC, you could say is Joe Willis, but also the third one, Xavier Valdez, a guy that has been called up to the international ranks of the Dominican Republic for a little bit of time. That is huge, because you look at a guy last season in Matthew Corcoran, who evolved into being a perennial box-to-box midfielder, a holding midfielder, and he had a lot of calls to the U20 national team for the United States, which I think was huge in his development. You look at the early rounds of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, a couple long balls he put to Jordan Knight, that one he put on a rope and Jordan Knight finished it, which was beyond, spectacular. It was awesome if you go back and watch those highlights. So there's a lot of positive feedback when it comes to Nashville SC's roster. The only issue right now is the injuries that you're dealing with, and that is Sam Surridge, Eddie Tagseth, and Patrick Yazbek. Like I've mentioned before earlier this week on Wednesday with Joe Dubin, it was Ben Wright with 615 Soccer that posted the video because he was boots on the ground in Monterey at El Volcan. Before the game in warmups, Patrick Yazbek was, caught limping off the field, then ended up coming back onto the sideline, but was with crutches. So that is something to keep an eye on. You wonder how that evolves for Nashville SC, and especially for Patrick Yazbek's, career alone by itself, because he wants to play for Australia in the World Cup. Those were his aspirations. You wonder if he can get healed enough to the point where he can be on the roster. So it's something to keep an eye on. But overall, this team's clicking on all cylinders. You just wonder if a team like DC that can get past the battle tonight, or not tonight, but tomorrow, excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with Nashville SC coming off that tough loss to Tigres, how quickly can they put that in the back of their minds and now focus on MLS competition? Because it's easy when you are that close to a significant club trophy. And I think it's also easy to forget that they won a trophy a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't even mentioned that. So this is a young team that also has already accomplished things and have seen what it takes to win these competitions. But it also is another side of it to where you're going to have to put away that disappointment rather quickly, to where you had to travel to Monterey just 3 or 4 nights ago, and now it's on the MLS competition. And you're going to be missing multiple really key cogs to what you like to do in your starting 11. So I am very interested. We heard him talk about tests. That is a test for this young team that I'm really, really interested in. Nick, there is one thing that you did mention that I'm curious to get your thoughts on, though. And
Sure.
You mentioned the goalkeeping situation. And when I heard you talking about that between Schwacke and Willis, there was a specific comparison that immediately came to mind, and it's right in the city. It kind of reminds you of the passing of the torch between Pekka Rinne and UC Saros 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It is very similar to where the longtime staple goaltender is kind of ushering in the next guy after him, this young goalkeeper that has come in, has developed in this system, and is slowly but surely starting to take that starting role consistently as the old guard kind of starts to find their way out and becomes the leader. I'm curious on what your thoughts on that, because when I heard you talking about that, that was the first thing that came to mind to me, to where it is a almost identical situation to what we saw with the Predators that we're seeing now of Nashville SC in their goalkeeping.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back in the history of Nashville SC, when even they were in the USL, it was Matt Pickens, and everybody, knows Matt Pickens as that goalkeeper coach. Then ended up, staying on staff with Gary Smith, and then evolving into more of Joe Willis was the goalkeeper. And then when BJ Callahan took over, you had Joe Willis as your keeper, and then you evolve into Brian Schwacke. And again, when you look at the difference of the two, I feel like last season there was a lot asked out of a guy like Joe Willis, because that's not a goalkeeper you see being like a sweeper keeper, being like that the additional defenseman in a roundabout way to pass the ball at your feet from outside the 18. I think there was a lot asked out of him to do that. You see that with Brian Schwacke now, that, left backs and right backs like Daniel Lovitz and Andy Nahar, even Jason Palacios and Maxwell Walitzi as the center backs, they're not afraid to pass it back to the goalkeeper. I'm not saying they were with Joe Willis, but it's just the youth movement with Nashville SC, especially at that goalkeeping position, where you can utilize your keeper a little bit more. I mean, it reminds me of the prime Manchester City days, and it's just how soccer's evolving as a whole, is where, Pep Guardiola liked to use Ederson as his sweeper keeper. And, you could say the godfather of all this was Manuel Neuer, the German goalkeeper way back in the day for Bayern Munich. That was the true sweeper keeper and was very useful with his feet. So I think that's just the new wave of soccer. It's the new wave of how stuff is being built out of the back. You wonder if that is going to stay the same status quo going forward in the game. I think it will. But yeah, no, you make a good point about the passing of the torch. And again, Joe Willis has been nothing but a great mentor for a guy like Brian Schwacke and Xavier Valdez when it was last season up into this season. So I think it's huge to have guys like that on your roster, especially when it comes to the midfielders as well. Like, I think we kind of forget about, I wouldn't say forget, but we take for granted, and we kind of mentioned with Mike, is the Hani Mukhtar realm of it all, being that captain of the team. a lot of Nashville SC fans and even national media have, I wouldn't say criticized Hani in this regard, but in the second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup without Sam Surridge, people were always wondering of like, well, how come Hani was not more involved in the offensive attack? Well, like, you got to think about this. One of your top talented center midfielders was injured before the game. So you're forcing your attacking midfielder, your trequartista, Hani Mukhtar, your creator in this case, to drop deeper into the midfield a little bit. And plus, Nashville wanted to spread the ball out wider in that second leg. So that's something you got to keep an eye on, and also keep in the back of your head of things change. The system kind of has to evolve a little bit. It's not specifically curated around one specific player. That's why I like, this Nashville SC team currently, is that we're seeing a new version of Hani Mukhtar. We saw it last season when Sam Surridge, I don't know if you recall the game where Sam Surridge and Hani Mukhtar was trying to figure out who was going to be kicking the penalty kicks going forward. And it was a changing of the guard, like you're talking about, the passing of the torch to Sam Surridge to take those penalty kicks. And I think once we recognize that situation, Hani took a more professional role and dropping deeper back into, attacking positions and also into more of a creative role. I'm not saying he's taking himself out of the attack. No, not by all means. It's just some situations it requires him to drop deeper back to create more overlapping runs and also just more space in between the lines for other guys like Warren Madrigal and Christian Espinoza.
And it's funny, while you were saying that, I couldn't help but to kind of look, because we've been talking about numbers like with Carnell Tate with the ADOT and things of that nature. I couldn't help but to kind of look up some of the numbers with Hani Mukhtar, and I was really pleasantly surprised almost just by the impact that he said, because like you said, he's had to drop back a little bit, and there has been a bit more of the changing of the guard. It's not just been Hani Mukhtar or nothing at all in terms of the striking and the attack for Nashville SC, but his impact offensively has still been just as there, if not more there, than when he was the main option. And if you want proof of that, his 2021 season, which was the season before his MVP season, but easily one of the best seasons of the prime of his career. He was 25 years old. His non-penalty goals plus assists per 90 minutes was 0.9. So far this season, at the age of 30, is 0.86. So his offensive impact is just about what it was 5 years ago at the age of 25, when he was the primary relied upon player for this team to produce offensively. And Nashville SC teams that, if you remember, the biggest criticism of those teams was that there was not enough offensive attack outside of Hani Mukhtar. Now he has that, but he is still producing at the same level that he was when he didn't have that. And if I am a Nashville SC fan, that makes me absolutely foam at the mouth at what this team could possibly do as their season continues on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the only unfortunate thing is not having that backup number 9, like we talked about earlier, about with Warren Madrigal kind of supplementing that space for a guy like Sam Surridge. Again, two different styles of players, which it kind of, again, it's the system and not the player. But when those two are, having to change places, it's tough to find that right, position for a guy like Warren Madrigal. I like him more on the outside, that left attacking role, mid role, and have Espinoza on the right. If you're talking about a full A team lineup, because then you have Sam up top, followed by Hani as that offsetting 9 and 10 there. But the midfielders right now, that's the big worry if you're a Nashville SC fan. How do you get past that? Obviously, Matthew Corcoran played a lot of minutes this past Tuesday. You wonder if there's going to be a heavy rotation of players this Saturday. That's my only worry right now for Nashville, if they start having a little bit of a hiccup before the World Cup break. And that is, trying to figure out what the midfield combination is going to look like. You're probably going to maybe be forced to play Brian Acosta a little bit more than you thought you would. That's a veteran player that you're going to have to try to find a space for. And then along with that, you got Matthew Corcoran, who I just mentioned. So you're kind of forced to play players on short rest. But again, this team is talented enough and strong-minded enough to where they can get the result you hope if you're a Nashville SC fan.
Yeah, and obviously just the importance of that midfield, because we've been talking about the attack with Sam Surridge, Hani Mukhtar. It's the midfield that is going to be able to set them up to get those opportunities. That is really the engine and the straw that stirs the drink more times than not for your offensive attack. It goes like in levels, right? Your defenders make a play, they move it up to your midfielders try to make a play up to your strikers and your attackers to get those goal-scoring opportunities. So that is the one sort of concern that you might have for Nashville SC, and that is a very reasonable one. But again, you still do have that transfer window that will open up. And obviously we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what Mike Jacobs has up his sleeve, but when you see what this team has been able to do with what it currently has, I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see if they try to shop around a little bit and see if they can make an addition or two to bolster up that midfield, give them more options, because this team has proven that they can go out and compete for cups. They can go trophy hunting. They can have that ability, and they have a good mix of youth and experience on this team to where it could make sense to add in a piece here or there in the midfield. That could be where they look to do it, to bolster that up and maybe shore up that position to make the lives easier of some of those attackers like Mukhtar and Surridge.
Yeah, it'll be definitely an interesting task for them this upcoming, summer transfer window when it comes to the World Cup. Again, like I mentioned before with Mike Jacobs, it's one of the more popular and I guess high volume transfer windows because of the value of players throughout the World Cup. It is going to be something to watch. And also too, Nashville is kind of, I'd say, constricted a little bit because of all the DP spots, the U22 spots, and like Mike, mentioned in the last segment of the last hour of how you construct the roster that is. So, and you make a good point about the MLS because Nashville right now is sitting at 23 points atop of the Eastern Conference, looking to kind of chase that Community Shield with basically the best record in MLS behind San Jose and Vancouver. In the Western Conference, San Jose with 28, Vancouver with 25, followed by Seattle and Minnesota in the Western Conference with 21 and 20. So Nashville basically sit 4 points ahead of New England, which is in second place at 19, followed by Inter Miami at third and 19. So that is something to watch for. As long as Nashville stays first place in the Eastern Conference for me, I'd be happy as a clam if you're a Nashville SC fan, because then you're able to look at the playoffs and be in a good position to win something. So like you said, go tournament chasing, go championship chasing. So that's the thing. We'll get into more other stuff when it comes to the Tennessee Titans in the next segment, kind of getting back on track here, because at the wonderful 10:30, we have the one and only Forever Titans wide receiver Chris Sanders. It's a bit of a special day as well for a guy like Chris Sanders. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on the other side right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game.
Oh, what you gonna do? You wanna get down? Tell me. Oh, what you gonna do?
Here we go.
Do you wanna get down? Oh, what you gonna do? You wanna get down?
Got me grooving on a Friday today. Here we go, Brandon Bigsby. I like it. A little bit. Here we go. Love
Hey, it's
it.
Friday, man. We gotta get it right. Gotta get the vibes going.
Yes, sir. Back here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Right here, Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier, alongside Brandon Bigsby. Today, the Vanderbilt Commodores take on Louisville at Hawkins Field. First pitch is at 5 p.m. Catch all the action on 102.5 The Game. Coverage is presented by Gary Force Acura. Check out the Commodores on the Diamond today. So that'll be fun. They need some wins, man. Got to get some wins here on the Diamond. So Tim Corbin will rally that team to get back to its old prime form. But kind of delving back into the Tennessee Titans here, and just we were talking earlier about the wide receiver room, what's going to look like under Brian Daboll, and how things may, evolve this fall. Just I like what they got going here. To me, I wonder, who would you go and grab in free agency, Brandon, if you're the Tennessee Titans? Do they need anybody from free agency, or you think you just kind of stick and roll with what you got on the roster right now into the fall?
I think right now you stick and see what you have in the room because you have invested so heavily into that group. I think you at least need to see in camp what the payoff of that looks like. And that doesn't mean that you have to keep it that way going into the season. We see a lot of times that during the preseason and after the preseason, we'll see a lot of these veterans that are still hanging around end up finding their way to a roster on a one-year deal. And there's other teams like Minnesota who said, we need a little bit more help, so let's go sign Jawan Jennings for a year. Minnesota has not invested in that position the way the Titans have. They went and spent the number 4 overall pick on Carnell Tate. They went and paid Wan'Dale Robinson a significant amount of money, and you still have 2 young receivers that are going into their sophomore seasons in Chimdike and Alec Iomanner that I think you want to wait and see what does the jump look like for them from year 1 into year 2. How have they improved? What does that look like? So I don't think that you have to stand pat going into the season, but I think at least going into training camp, going into the preseason, you want to wait and see what the group that you have invested so much into looks like as a unit.
My only question would be to find maybe some more offensive line help, maybe. You have Fernando Carmona that you brought in from Arkansas, Pat Coogan from Indiana. You have some draft picks there, but I wonder if you maybe bring back a guy like Kevin Zeitler, you think? I mean, that's always been a hot name when it comes to free agent acquisitions and bringing back maybe like a one-year deal or so. But I don't know. I think there might just be 1 or 2 more names you go for free agency to kind of really solidify and bolster the depth of this team interiorly.
See, I think the interesting thing, too, of Zeitler is that I would also kind of put him in that same boat if I think you're waiting and see what the investments look like. I think they're going to try to wait and see if maybe a guy like Jackson Slater has made that jump and is ready to take over in that spot, or if a guy like Pat Coogan is going to come in and be a day 1 starter. Volson is another guy that they seem to be very high on. I think that Kevin Zeitler, if it's me, I bring him back, and I think that that's probably something that I could see happening in late July or early August, but I understand the process of Mike Borgonzi and Robert Saleh looking at this room and seeing the young players and some of the free agents that they've brought in and saying, let's see if these guys are good enough to be in our starting unit week in, week out. Let's see the improvement of some of these guys we drafted last year and have invested that capital into. I understand that. And I think that there is something to be said about that patience. Me personally, I would feel more comfortable with Kevin Zeitler because I am very concerned to see what would happen if Cam Ward had another season like last year to where he is standing back in the pocket and is getting beat up back there because there is a lack of protection.
Yeah, you make a good point there. We'll have to get one of very only forever Titans wide receiver Chris Sanders' thoughts on this on the other side. I heard it's a special day for him, and we'll get into more of that with Chris Sanders on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Perfect combination. Might as well. Stevie Wonder, happy birthday, because it's somebody's special day today. Forever Titans wide receiver Chris Sanders joins the show on his special day. Chris, happy birthday to you, man. How are you?
Man, I'm doing pretty good, man. I thought I can go out there and run some routes, but my hamstring gave out. I got a bunion on my toe. So
Oh, really?
I actually feel 54. But man, thank y'all for saying that. Just thank God that I made 54. So man, I appreciate y'all acknowledging that.
Hey, you got next year. You're about to hit the speed limit, the double nickel.
Hey, the funny thing about it is when I went to my mailbox, I got that AARP thing. That means you're old. So you're old when you do that. So I actually feel pretty good. But at the end of the day, thank God I made 54.
Love it, man. Happy birthday to you. Anything
Yes, sir.
special
Thank
you're
you,
doing
my
today?
friend. No, my wife's gonna do something. I asked her, but she wouldn't tell me. We got a track meet tonight, so I think tomorrow she's gonna have something special for me to do. So I'm excited. I'm gonna eat a whole bunch of cake, and I'm gonna eat all the food or wherever we go.
There you go. Love to hear that. Well, Chris, happy birthday to
Appreciate
you.
you, man.
We're going to get into some
Thank you, sir.
Titans here real quick. We had this
Sure.
conversation earlier, Brandon and I, and we were talking about the A-dot receiver along with the yak yard receiver. The A-dot receiver
Mhm.
basically is Carnell Tate in a roundabout way, because his
Right.
average last year for A-dot, being an A-dot receiver, which is creating that space between, the receiver all the way downfield without the ball in your hands. And it would average to like 14.8 at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Obviously, college football, the NFL football is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But where do you see him fitting in best in this offense under Brian Daboll?
I think he's going to play the X receiver because what he does at the line of scrimmage. So when you have a guy that big, that physical, he's 6'3", 195, and I think he had 121 catches. But here's the thing that I love that he does well is he can run the route tree. When you have a guy that's an X that can run the route tree, can run the hitch, the slant, the corners, all those things that you can have in a number one wide receiver. That's what you need to help your quarterback. Because I watched him. I watched him in the I think it was the Michigan game, to where he ran a post corner post. And when he ran it so perfectly that the defensive back was out of place. So when you got a guy like that can run the route trick and do those things, he just makes your offense better and he makes your quarterback better.
When it comes to Brian Daboll as a offensive play caller, it just seems like, when he was the play caller in New York and Malik Neighbors went down in that second season, Wan'Dale Robinson became the primary receiver.
Right.
Just seeing him jump from, year one with Daboll and Wan'Dale Robinson had like roughly 600 something odd yards. Then when Neighbors goes down the following season, Robinson's numbers jump up over 1,000 yards receiving. How confident does that make you feel when you see a wide receiver that jumps 400 yards to 500 yards in one offseason to just be that perennial wide receiver when needed and called upon?
I mean, the one thing you got to do as a coach, because I coach wide receivers at Montgomery Bell Academy, and you got to figure out what your guy does best. So they have a situation with Robinson to where his first year, his numbers wasn't as high. So now he becomes the number one guy. So you sit and you evaluate, okay, is he good in the slot? Is he good in the X? Is he good at the Z? And figure out what he does, because you got Robinson to where he might not be as well on the perimeter, but you put him in a slot to where he can create space and go in motion and run the choice routes, run the seams. That's what Daboll's going to do, to where he's going to put that guy in position to succeed. So that's what a coach does. We always talk about coaches developing players and helping run the right routes. That's great. But also as a coach, you got to make sure formation-wise that you put your receiver in a position to be successful. And I think it's going to be outstanding with the weapons that they have this year.
Yeah, you make a good point about that. Just putting the players in the right position to succeed.
Yeah.
And I just, that's something with Brian Daboll that has struck a chord with me, is just how he disguises his offense and just getting players open, even if it's in the yak yard situation or even on the sideline situation of toe tapping and stuff like that. I just think that's something to really emphasize on if you're a guy that's, following Brian Daboll's offense scheme as a whole.
Yeah, because and the thing about it is you want to make sure that you let their skill set come to fruition. I'm gonna give you a perfect example. Just imagine if you go a 10 personnel, 1 back, 0 tight end, and 4 wide receivers, and then you go a 3-by-1, and you have the 1 receiver, the 2 receiver, the 3 receiver. You don't want to put him at the 2 receiver because they said it, because he gets jammed at the line of scrimmage. So now you put him at the number 1 to where he can go in motion, and then all of a sudden he creates space and let him have the suddenlies to where he gets in and out of his cuts. Those are the things how you make your wide receiver special and make him make plays.
Forever Titans wide receiver joins us on Next Man Up, Chris Sanders. Chris, we've been talking a little bit earlier about the addition of Carnell Tate and how him being that bona fide X wideout who Cam Ward can rely on to go up and get the ball because he has that ability to make plays after the catch and to be a reliable receiver for him because of his consistency of bringing the ball in and not having many drops at Ohio State. How do you feel like, in addition to him, not only helps the wide receiver room, but helps the development of Cam Ward as the Titans look to prop him up?
You know, you said the perfect word, consistent. I mean, you in this league, you're going to stay long if you're consistent. And the one thing I love about this kid is not that he just runs the route tree to perfection. Is just like we said, he goes up and gets the football. Look at the game when he played against Wisconsin. Your quarterback, Salin, he just throws the ball up and let your receiver just make a play. Now you have a situation to where you got Cam Ward. Everybody knows that Cam Ward likes to scramble. Everybody knows that Cam Ward likes to just throw the ball and let guys make plays. Now you got a big 6'3", 6'4", 195 guy with big hands that catches the ball at the high point. You just throw it up when you're in trouble and let that guy make plays. That's how it makes your offense better. That's how the play calling gets better. Why? Because you have a big 6'3", 195-pounder that goes up and attacks the football and makes plays for your team.
I know we've talked a good bit about the addition of Wan'Dale Robinson and Carnell Tate. How does that affect some of the wide receivers that are coming back from last season's team? Calvin Ridley, Jim Dike, and Lagaya Manor, they're still in the building. How are they impacted by all of this?
Hey, let me tell you something. In 1999, I think it was 1998, they brought in Yancey Thigpen and they drafted Kevin Dyson. So now I'm like, wait a minute, I can still play this game. But the one thing that I had to understand that everybody needs to know their role. Because if you look at this receiver room right now, there's a lot of guys. You got DK, you got Ellick, you got Restrepo, you got Oliver. You don't forget about Bryce Oliver. He's there also. Guys that can make plays. So the one thing that this receiving group has to understand is you can't be selfish. I know Calvin really wants the football. I know Calvin Tate's going to want the football. I know Robinson's going to want the football. But you got to understand, if your vision is to win the championship, if your vision is to win games, then you're going to have to be unselfish at time. Because here's what they're going to have to work through. When it's 3rd and 5, and you have to have a first down, and they go to Robinson. How is Tate going to handle it, and how is Ridley going to handle it? If they handle it in a professional manner and say, okay, you know what, I still have the opportunity to make plays. Now you have a situation where that receiver room can work.
Yeah, Chris, kind of switching from the receivers, still sticking on the offensive side of the ball with the running backs. You know, the 5th-round pick, Nicholas Singleton out of Penn State, that dude seems to be a dog in some aspects. He basically has broken the touchdown record at Penn State. You look at other things that he's done. Yeah. One thing that I think gets, overlooked is his pass blocking ability. Yep. You look at this Titans offensive line that has struggled in years past. You look at the left tackle position and also the right tackle position with J.C. Latham on the right and Dan Moore Jr. on the left. You wonder if you use more of like a 12 personnel and include a guy like Nick Singleton as an extra pass blocker. I mean, that's just like talking about, every pass blocking ability known to man. But would you see him being more used as a pass blocker or more as a run effective player in year one as a rookie?
I think you can use him in all aspects because you love what this guy brings to the table. And if I can remember, he had 45 TDs, average 5.6 yards average. And then he's a guy who can, if a blitz comes off the edge, he can pick up the blitz. So you want to have a complete back. But here's the thing that I love about this kid right here is if you look at last year, who was one of the worst offensive scoring touchdowns? Tennessee Titans, right? Yeah. So now you get a guy who has 13 games with multiple touchdowns. So what does that mean? That means this guy can score touchdowns. This guy can make plays, and this guy can say, okay, you know what? Even if our passing game isn't going well, I can make some plays in the running game. And then on the flip side, just like you said, go 12 personnel to where you can put him in a fullback position to where if somebody comes off the edge, you can protect your quarterback. So it's not just a guy to where he can run the football. It's not just a guy where he can pass, bro. He's a complete back that can score touchdowns, but also protect your quarterback.
Yeah, and another thing when it comes to that running back room as a whole, there's been talks about Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard entering their last years of their contracts. You also have young running backs like Khalil Mullins. I mean, obviously Michael Carter was with Robert Saleh in New York. He's coming from Arizona previously. And then you still have Julius Chestnut in that running back room. How do you see all that working out with just such a congested room of running backs? Because you sign a guy like Michael Carter, who's been with Saleh before, Singleton being a draft pick, and you have Spears and Pollard entering that last year.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. It creates competition. And that's what you want. And when you have a lot of running backs in that running back room, it creates competition. Guys want to be perfect. Guys want to keep showing them film. So if I'm a Chestnut guy, if I'm a guy that's teetering of of making the football team, this is what I'll do. I'll make sure I'm on every special teams, and I'll make sure I do my job at running backs because you want to make yourself valuable to the team because you have two guys that are similar, but you have one guy that just plays running back, and you have another guy that plays running back and plays special teams. He's more valuable to the team. So, yes, you have a crowded running back room, but at the end of the day, which one is valuable for them to stay? So it's a whole bunch of dudes in there, but which dude is going to step up and be a part of this team?
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned Yancey Thigpen earlier. Just looking at this team right now, what memories comes to your mind when it comes to being a rookie back then in your heyday and trying to make a team and also just put a stamp on your name on a roster?
The thing that I had to do is I had to make sure that my whole team trusts me, and I'm gonna tell you why. I remember it was I think it was the last preseason game we were going against the Washington Redskins, and my coach came up and told me, Coach Les Steckel, he said you have to do good this game, or they're gonna put you on the practice squad, or they're gonna put you on the active roster. So what I did is it was I think it was four. Hey, this is weird. It was 4th and 20 something. So I asked the quarterback. I said, "Hey, tell Coach to go for it." So what I did, he said, "All right, we did it." They went for it. So I ran a curl. And I caught it, and I spun it, and I ran for like 50 yards, and the whole sidelines went bananas. The offensive coordinator went bananas. The defense went bananas because I made a play when there was no play to be made. So what I had to do to earn the trust of my players, I had to keep showing up a film and make that play to remember that I can play this game.
Chris, final question on my end. You look at this Titans roster, obviously so much that has been invested into the offense, especially the receiver room. But me and Nick, we were actually just kind of having a bit of a debate before you got on about whether the Titans need to add in free agency to what they already have. So I'm curious what you think. Would you run it with what they currently have, considering what they've already invested, or do you feel like maybe Tennessee could use an addition in the wide receiver room or the offensive line with what they have in the building now?
I think it's the offensive line. I mean, if you look at last year, there was guys that would get hurt on the offensive line, but then there was no depth. I mean, Derek Mason, I don't want to steal his thunder, but he always talked about this team is okay, but they don't have any depth. Because if you look at the linemen that they have right now, you got Latham, you got Pat Coogan from Indiana, you got Morgan Cox that we really don't know about. We got Dickerson, we got DJ Moore, we got Skoronski, we got Slater, we got Bolson, and we got Webb. There's a couple of guys that you know, but then there's some couple of guys you don't know. So I think that what they need to do is they need to build depth on the offensive line and have depth at every position. So I believe they can run with this team, but at the end of the day, there's going to be injuries, and you got to make sure that you have depth.
Chris Sanders, forever Titans wide receiver. Happy birthday to you, Chris. Enjoy a Friday. Best of luck tonight.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Take care. That's Chris Sanders, forever Titans wide receiver, joining us here on Next Man Up. A lot of great stuff from Chris. We'll react to that on the other side on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Next man up, 102.5 The Game, as we come back grooving, man. I love Brandon Bigsby on the ones and twos, just grooving today on a Friday. That's how we roll, man. Chris Sanders, last segment, man, he had a lot of great things to say about the Titans and just, evolving the roster and trying to find your spot. And Brandon, we were talking during the break. It's real interesting to hear his perspective on the wide receiver room and also the running back room. That was something that I kind of struck a chord with me, is that there are a lot of running backs, and it doesn't just make it difficult for the players. I think it makes it difficult for a guy like Bones Fossil that's on the staff already, trying to evaluate guys that are going to be playing on the special teams, rotation. Because you mentioned in the break was Khalil Mullins and Julius Chestnut. Those are guys you have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and then you look at the receiving room, Bryce Oliver, a guy who is kind of borderline with the roster right now with how many guys he added, who is an ace for them on special teams. So as great as it is that the Titans have added in all of these pieces and they have this competition that they're going to have at two position groups where they quite frankly have needed it for a while, it does kind of have a bit of a trickle-down effect, because it is a blessing for the offense and a curse for the special teams, because you might have to give up a potentially really productive special teams player for a guy on offense that you think can come in and have some of that upside and can contribute, just because there's only 53 roster spots available to you.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to draft players that are versatile, that can do multiple things. That's why you look at guys like Derek Mason, who was a late round pick that ended up becoming one of the best wide receivers in franchise history for the Tennessee Titans, because he found himself in a spot where he could be a multi-versatile player. And that's something that the Titans are trying to get back to for the most part. We talk about the running back rooms, but also the wide receivers. You got to have to be really good gunners. And that's, looking at guys like Bryce Oliver, you wonder if they could be a part of the special teams. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this current wide receiver room. And I don't know if you mentioned already the selfishness aspect of it. Have to be selfless instead of selfish. And I think that was something you were going to bring up with Chris, right?
Yeah, because Chris mentioned that. And it's always so interesting to hear from somebody that not only experienced the NFL, but someone who is currently a coach as well. As he mentioned, he coaches wide receivers at NBA. So it's something that he has seen on both sides of that. And for the Titans wide receivers that not only are coming in now, but were here last year, all of them to some sort of extent are going to have to adjust to a different role than what they're used to. Calvin Ridley, when he signed with the Titans in 2023, he came in as the Titans wide receiver one. He was expected to be the guy that was getting the most targets. He was expected to be the guy that was in on all three downs. Now he's wide receiver 3. Wan'Dale Robinson was wide receiver 1 by default, but last year and the year before, he was wide receiver 2, was getting 140 plus targets. That might go down to more like 100. Carnell Tate, who is used to having to share the spotlight because he lined up next to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison throughout his tenure at Ohio State, is going to have to be willing to give some of that up despite having that pedigree of being the number 4 overall pick and wanting to come out and prove himself of being worth that. All of these guys, Jim Dike, Alec Iomar, they're going to have to sacrifice for the betterment of the team, because if you want to win football games, you're going to have to do what is going to put your team in the best position to do so. And sometimes those things aren't going to align with what your own personal goals might be. So when he talked about that, and especially with the wide receiver position, which has that reputation of being a knee position, that really intrigued me, because of all of these additions, that's going to be something that the Titans are going to have to make sure to manage throughout the year.
Absolutely. And something else we have to manage, and hopefully he brought my Rayon City card, and that's Mike Organ. Mike Organ with the Tennessean. He joins us for the whole third and final hour right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Third and final hour here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier. And if you see on the stream next to me, the one and only Rayon City's finest, Mike Oregon, is here with the Tennessee. And here next to me for the final hour, along with Brandon Bigsby behind the glass. Mike, how in the world are you, buddy?
I'm good if I'm on.
Hit that. There we go. The other one. There you go.
I'm good if I'm on, so I wasn't on, so I'm not good. But I am happy to be in from Rayon City. Just got in, just landed in Rayon City this morning, actually, on the little private
the plane
out there we've got out there, and a little runway that Joe Dublin and I use pretty often, and just came straight over from there.
Did you bring my card, the Rayon City card?
I'm still, you and I are going to have to hash out this NIL deal before I
Okay.
decide if you get the card or
That's
not. I've
fine.
got it,
Okay.
and I've got it laminated. I went by FedEx last night and got it laminated.
You're too kind.
But we got to wait and see.
Yeah, it's all a wait and see game, especially with NIL, along with other stuff we'll get into. But yeah, I guess we can start with college football and just the NIL and the playoff expansion probabilities. It's just where you stand on all this when it comes to the expansion and also just NIL in general.
Well, I was on with, and I guess I can say this because he's with the station George Plaster Wednesday, and Parker asked me, you know, what my perfect number was, and I think he thought I was going to say 16 or 24, something beyond what we are now, and I said 8. We already passed my perfect number.
Yeah.
I want a playoff that everybody in it can win, that all the contestants can win. Otherwise, it's not really a playoff. And we're at a point now where everybody can't win. There's no way that everybody can win. You've got about 6 or 8 teams that can win. That's all there is to it. And that's stretching it a little bit. So if you go beyond that, it's just a participation sport, as you said off there. That's all it is. And it's about money. It's just getting more money involved. And that's what they'll go. They'll go to 24. And then I think they'll hold tight for a little bit. I really hope they don't go beyond 24, but there's no reason to think they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the FCS, and again, this has been my argument ever since this whole idea of expansion has been brought up, is that the FCS has done it right. They have a 24-team playoff, but the rules constructed around that tournament is all perfect. They have everything situated when it comes to NIL, when it comes to everything like that. You look at the FBS level, it is the wild, wild west, and you can't seem to figure out, can we get the NIL structure down? Can we have some form of a salary cap? Again, not trying to cap anybody's version of money, and I get all that. But there has to be some form of structure, maybe an unwritten rule or whatever it may be, because it's crazy. You can't seem to figure out what you're going for in the FBS level of college football.
Yep. And forever, the FCS model, like you said, served as the model that could have FCS that could have been followed. Now it's gotten to the point where it can't be followed because still pretty much everybody in the FCS can win.
Yes.
Now it's getting a little bit lopsided with those teams in the Northwest, as we saw this year. But even with that, Illinois State hung in there really well with Montana. So that's still a playoff that most of the teams can, not most, but many of the teams can win a whole lot more than on the FBS level. So you've kind of blew it by not following that model all along. So now you're going to have to come up with your own system. And again, it's just, I've been saying this for many years, going all the way back to 1999 when Boots Donnelly told me this, is we're headed for a 40-team super conference. And, 40 stretching it. 40 is probably the most. It could be 30. It could be 35. I think it'll be that many. And it'll just be a mini NFL. That's all it'll be. And that's every game will matter like the NFL. Every game will be a big TV game. There won't be any Tennessee versus Tennessee Martins or Tennessee Techs. Every game you'll play everybody. All 40 teams will play everybody at some point in the rotation. And it'll be all driven by television. Television will take care of the money and everything, and all the athletes will be paid. And that's where we're headed. And then how they do their playoff will be very similar to the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's say if they were to expand it to 24 teams, let's be honest, it would be the SEC versus the Big Ten. And I'd say 8 of those spots would go to just open market to the ACC, to smaller schools like James Madison. They would still appease the, group of 5 team to get in for one of those spots, but then you have 7 spots that are open up to maybe like the Pac-12 or, the Big 12 or ACC, but core 16 of those are going to the SEC and to the Big 10.
Yeah, and that's when I say super conference, which, I've been watching this since 2000. And when I say super conference, I'm talking about that's what it'll be. It'll probably be two divisions.
Right.
It'll be what we once knew of as the SEC and the Big 10. Everything we've been seeing for the last, 8 to 10 years has been trending that way. And on speed dial the last 3 to 4 years. And that's what they're all settling in now. We're trying to figure out who can make it and who can't make it in this grand scheme.
And also, too, you mentioned at the beginning of this segment of how the money is involved with all of this. I've brought up before with college basketball, it's like $1.7 to $1.1 billion or something like that annually, which is a ridiculous TV contract. But you look at the college football playoff with ESPN, that tournament value is $1.3 billion. So imagine if you expand that. Again, it's a money-driven system. You're going to probably get near $2 billion, probably around same thing as college basketball and for men's and women's of 1.7 in that range.
Yeah, when you take out those early games, when you mention like a James Madison, those games that the opponent absolutely has no business being in it. You take out those early games, and then you add higher profile teams that bring a better TV audience and more attention. Then you could do that's just going to take the dollar figure higher.
And also too, and Joe mentioned this, I believe it was on Wednesday or Thursday this week, one of the 2 days I was with him, we talked about more on-campus games. I think that'll even drive the number up even higher because say if it's an ACC team that has a long shot of making the college football playoff, well, ESPN has a deal with the ACC network. They're going to have a game on that channel and or a secondary version of it, like the Skyview version on the ACC network, whatever it may be, as an example, going up against an SEC team. That just creates more opportunities to watch it at different angles where you have an SEC broadcast of ACC broadcast in the booth, whatever it may be. I just think that's just going to make it go through the roof as well.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the NFL model. The NFL model doesn't play neutral games.
That's right.
We go back to it where you'll have one, and it'll be seeded. We'll know which one is favored by where they are, and it'll just drive interest up that much more and more TV revenue.
And also, it makes you wonder the playoff selection format of it all. If you have 24 teams, are you still going to have a in-person selection of, this team's 24? You can't, right?
No.
Absolutely not.
No. Even with AI coming in and being so prominent now, you'll have a format where the top 2 teams, I don't know how they'll be broken down, but then you'll know who's going to go, you'll know what you need to do to get in the playoffs. You need to finish first or second in whatever division you're in, and there'll be maybe a wild card like with NFL and like with every other league, and you'll know what you need to do. There won't be a committee that can be criticized. There won't be a computer ranking that can be questioned. It'll just be, cut and dry in the preseason what you're going to have to do to be in the playoffs.
Well, there is a Twitter account. It basically follows the computer model of the BCS format, even though the college football playoff format still exists. I like to do this thing every year when it comes around that time of college football playoff, is compare the top 12 teams that make it in the BCS comparison to what's going on now and the comparison of what, the selection committee has chosen. So it's pretty interesting to look at. It makes me wonder, would the college football playoff committee be interested in going back to that format just to stay, status quo, to have teams that qualify?
At this point, anything's on the table. I could see that happening. Absolutely. There's nothing cut and dry with it's going to be so fast moving. Yeah, I could see that. The BCS model wasn't that bad.
No,
not
I didn't
at
think
all.
so at all. I mean, sure, when you have way back in the day, it was Alabama versus Texas. You always understood Alabama's going to make it 9 times out of 10 because of the computer rankings of how it all played out. But I think now with a more expanded format of a playoff, you can use that format. It's more of an even playing field, a better baseline to all these teams.
Yeah, that's what you need. That's and I just whatever it takes to get the best teams in. And the problem is when you go so big, there's not that many best teams, and especially in the NIL transfer portal area. The good players are going to transfer early on to the better teams, so you have so fewer really good teams. And that's the model that nobody expected when all this started to happen. When we started heading toward a super conference, was nobody expected to have this lopsided NIL.
Now, help me out with this idea here, Mike. When it comes to, let's say, a wild card game or like a play-in game, you have to definitely check off the grocery list of having those group of 5 teams included in the playoff. Say there is a wild card game of 2 group of 5 teams that won their conference championship. They do a play-in game to get into the college football playoff. You suffice that rule now of a G5 team is in the playoff. The rest of that, I guess, fills out with Power 4 teams. Well, you think that'd be a logical aspect to use?
Yeah, as long as the NCAA is still involved, you're going to have group of 5 involved.
Right.
So, yeah, you're going to have to do something like that. And something legitimate like what you propose, I think is good. And I guess that's what I haven't looked at the field of 76 yet, but I guess that's what they're looking at. I mean, you'll have some more of that along with, the 8th place SEC team or the 10th place Big Ten team getting in or ACC. But yeah, I think that would help. Now, the problem is it's not going to do anything TV wise. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to drive move the meter any. But the NCAA supposedly has never worried about that. So as long as the NCAA is still involved, that's a feasible way to go.
Yeah. So with the college football playoff potentially expanding, there also is the conference championship games that we kind of just mentioned there. When it goes for Power 4 schools, and we'll get on this on the other side, what does that mean for those conference championship games? Are those eliminated full and full? Do you just have a regular season champion, or do you use those as another bullet point mark to assess a team going into the playoff? We'll get into more of that on the other side right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. We've been grooving today, Mike. All right. This has been the theme. Brandon Bigsby's been just grooving all day long behind the glass. I love it. Love every bit of it. Next man up, 1025 The Game. Hey, boxing fans, 1025 The Game and the Team Boxing League have your chance to win tickets to see Nashville Smash take on the Boston Butchers at Municipal Auditorium Saturday, May 23rd. 16 rounds and 16 fighters each go at it for one round of nonstop action. Text the keyword FIGHT, FIGHT, to the Game text line at 615-737-1025 to enter for your chance to win. Team Boxing League is something, Mike. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I have not, but I am fascinated by it. That's one of the things when you hear the advertisement, you're like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
And it's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. And I'm trying to line up a match with Joe Dubin in that. I would love that. And if not me, one of the Gaines brothers and Joe Dubin.
If you need somebody to promote that, I'm not a promoter, but I can definitely get something facilitated for you.
I want you in my corner.
I got you. And look, I will not even throw the white flag in because I know you'll last the whole entire fight.
Oh, gosh.
It'll go down to unanimous decision. I mean, hopefully Joe's not listening. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But hey, also too, if you're watching us on the YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel at 1025 The Game for live shows and exclusive content. I mean, look, you're seeing my face, not only mine, but the one and only Mike Organ.
I didn't know that. You just told me that. Now I would have got makeup done and all that before if I had known coming in.
Sorry. Our makeup artist is out of town this week. You know,
I barely even brushed my hair. I mean,
you had to put a hat on and everything.
I know.
My goodness. Before the break, we were talking about college football and just looking at the conference championships. Like when it comes to the SEC, and Joe and I have had this conversation about how just get rid of it, use the regular season conference champions. And if there are co-champions, you just go about that. For me, I think you have to keep it in this case for seeding purposes. If you use that BCS format, I don't know where you stand on that, but also too, where does that lead into a possible CBA reform with possibly sitting out a year for college football?
Yeah. Well, I did a story earlier this week on Greg Sankey, who was on with Feinbaum. And he said, you know, people just say this stuff flippantly, like, let's just do away with the conference championship. You can't walk away from contracts. And these are long-term contracts, not just contracts, but relationships. He brought up, he said, we have a great relationship with the Atlanta Falcons, with the city of Atlanta, with the stadium, Mercedes-Benz stadiums. He said, you know, you just don't just say, hey, we decide we want out of this. We're not going to do that, pay off, whatever you have to do. He said, you just can't walk away from contracts. He said, basically, he added, he goes, we have enough of that in college football now. And what he was referring to, and he didn't say it, but he's talking about kids transferring 3, 4, 5 times. So, you know, that's one thing. That's one hang up there. And the other thing he said is we're always talking about deciding the champion on the field. Well, we went to this to decide the champion on the field, to do away with all those arguments about, well, you know, at the end of the year, Tennessee was better than Alabama. Alabama beat Tennessee in at mid-season, but the end of the year. He said, we did this to get away from that. So he said, well, this is something we need to sit tight on and just don't diss. Now, the problem is, and we see it more in basketball and baseball, teams just go in not caring and wanting, you know, and there you've got series. So, you know, they just want out as soon as they can to start preparing for the tournament. In football, it's different, but football takes more of a physical toll. And so and there's more a possibility of injury. So that's the reason to do away with it. So it's an interesting balance. But if you just keep adding games, and that's what you're doing by expanding the tournament, the playoff, then something's got to go. Now the College Football Coach Association, which Clark Lee is the president of, said, well, do away with one of the 2 open dates. Well, I don't care what you do. I think you should do away with one of the open dates anyways. That's one thing I've never liked about college football, and it's only on the FBS level. To have 2 open dates, just you can't get in a groove. It feels like to me.
Yeah,
so
it throws you off a little bit.
It does. So there's one game, but still, when they start talking and going to 24, you're going to need some more somewhere else. So that's one thought, and a championship game could be.
Yeah, and like talking about how those contracts, like you're talking with Greg Sankey and you're talking about Atlanta with Mercedes-Benz, it's hard to put those contracts on hold if there is a stoppage in college football for a season to kind of differentiate all the money.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's the issue is if you add more games with this college football playoff expansion to some degree, then you have to expand the money that's involved with it for not only the TV money and for the universities, but for the players.
Yeah.
And again, that was just something I mentioned with Joe earlier this week of like maybe capping in 5 NIL, companies to endorse a player or something like that. It's not really on the financial side of things, but it can be. And that was something you kind of mentioned to me before the hour. That is,
Yeah, you'd have to come up with an agreement amongst everybody, and that's where we're talking union, collective bargaining for everybody to play by the same rules, because the NCAA doesn't have that jurisdiction anymore. The Supreme Court ruling took it away from them, and the Supreme Court ruling is not going to come back and rule on something like this. So yeah, there's a lot of great ideas out there. And, a lot of people wanted Nick Saban to be the king of college football, but Nick was smart enough, I think, to realize, what am I going to, a king without power? Or what am I going to be, just a royalty figure? And I think that's why we haven't seen anybody take this, what would be an incredible position to have. If you could fix things, you can't fix things. That's the bottom line. Right now, there's just not a vehicle in place because of the Supreme Court ruling to change the fundamental thing, which is each athlete has the right to make as much money as they can.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned, Saban just there. I feel like if Saban were to take that opportunity to be the president of college football, whatever it may be, there's always going to be that one guy chirping in his ear, and that's Greg Sankey, because of the rapport they built through the SEC, him being a coach and him being the commissioner of the conference. I feel like Sankey would kind of not be overruling some stuff that Saban says, but definitely influencing some certain things that he kind of wants. I mean, obviously so. When you're one of the commissioners, you want to have the best conference out there. And that's something you kind of give, a little pushback at 16 teams or 24 teams. Sankey definitely has a say in a lot of that.
Yeah. And Sankey seems to have a little bit more reasonable ideas, I think, than what we're seeing from the Big Ten and some of the other influential people. I've liked what I've seen from Sankey recently. I liked what he said about the championship games, just hold on, pump the brakes here. We can't just do this. We can't do things. Yes, it seems like that's what we're doing because it is the Wild Wild West, as you said earlier, but there are certain things you just can't do it with because their contracts already in place.
Yeah, and that's why I'm just so concerned for the future of college athletics as a whole, because like we just talked about the Wild Wild West, but you don't know what the future is financially because everybody's all gung-ho on the TV deals and the brand deals with, Nike or whatever it may be. They forget about the other aspect of the players. And obviously players, like we talked about earlier with NIL, we get all that, but that's the big issue is finding the right balance of money for these players. Because at this point, look, I could go back and get my master's. I got 4 years to play football, Mike, and or another sport. I'm going to go try and get as much as I can from the NIL value. Like you're going to start seeing a little bit of that, I think.
Whatever happened to that where they were going to give some money to some of the recent athletes? I never heard it. And I know most of the athletes that play around here and I stay in touch with them. I haven't had anybody come up and tell me, hey, I got my check for, when I played at Vanderbilt from 18 to 22, Drew Maddox, he deserves some money. There's a lot of guys that deserve money.
But that goes to show
in
you
their mind.
The discombobulation you got right now with the NCAA and the college football playoff, along with college athletics as a whole when it comes to basketball. There's just so much confusion. You don't know where to start from. That's what frustrates me the most when you look at FCS college football playoff to the FBS version, because there's structure in one of them and there's not structure in the other.
None whatsoever. And you talk about the balance. Here's the other thing that was always talked about in the early 2000s when we first started talking about paying players. It was, well, how much are you going to play the number one quarterback in the country? How much are you going to pay Arch Manning compared to the number 3 tennis player? How much are you going to pay your basketball center compared to your softball backup pitcher? And, then you get into Title IX, and Title IX has just been dismissed in all of this. And so what you're seeing now, and you're going to see more and more of it, are schools. And I'm not just talking about mid-major or small schools, big schools dropping sports.
Yeah.
Because they can't fund NIL for their tennis teams, their swimming teams, whatever. It could be, it'll be baseball teams at some point. And, it's going to come down to college athletics. It's going to be football and basketball.
Yeah, it
That's
really
what
is.
it looks like.
And like with the expansion of the men's and women's college basketball programs into the tournament, like we talked a bit ago, it's like a participation trophy. But when you expand it like that, you're now eliminating some of those smaller conference teams like a Belmont or a Trevecca or a TSU, something along those lines, where they probably won't be participating. And or if that is their only, revenue of a sport, they're going to invest everything they can. And 1 year, if they don't make it, that could set them back a couple years.
Absolutely. This goes back. This reminds me of when Belmont left the OVC, left and went to the OVC, left the Atlantic Sun and went to the OVC. Well, everybody thought that the natural step would be for Lipscomb. Their arch rival 3 miles down the road would do the same. So I talked to the people with the OVC and they said, no, that's not going to happen. And I said, why? And they said, the rest of the OVC doesn't want Lipscomb because Lipscomb is a basketball only school. They don't have to fund football. Belmont is the same way. So Belmont comes into the OVC and dominates because Belmont has a lot of money, a lot of music money, and they can put all their money into men's basketball, and they just dominated. And they also dominated women's basketball. So because they didn't have to fund a football team, the rest of the OVC, and especially Murray State, said, no, we don't want another one of these teams coming in here. So no, Lipscomb's not coming in, and Lipscomb never did. And now Belmont obviously has moved on from the OVC, and Lipscomb never joined it. So that gets back to what you're talking about with schools like like Tennessee State and 1AA, which is FCS now, schools that have to fund football. And yes, it is funding football because football doesn't make money on that level or on the top level in some cases.
Yeah, that's very true. So, I mean, we'll get into a little bit of that on the other side, but there's something special coming up on Saturday, Mike. Is that right? A little bit of some horse racing action. We're not talking Kentucky Derby. No. In our backyard, the steeplechase.
Yep. Not horsing around, buddy. We'll be out there.
You got that right. We'll talk a little steeplechase on the other side right here on Next Man Up on 102.5 The Game. Back here on Next Man Up 102.5 The Game with Mike Organ, the one and only Rayon City's finest. I don't care what they say about Joe Dubin and you. You guys go back and forth, but what's the hierarchy there, Rayon City? Is it you then Joe?
Joe's
or?
not a native. He moved in.
I know
so
that,
he can never be president.
He claims that he is like the top.
No, he grew up out in Donaldson, and no, he moved in when they ran him out of Donaldson, and we took him in, and he did a good job. He came from kind of being a degenerate basically to we ran him through some programs and got his act cleaned up a little bit. And he's held some lower councilman offices.
Start somewhere.
But no, he can never hold any high sheriff office or anything like that.
You set the record straight.
He hangs around at the laundromat and
collects the quarters.
We have a laundromat / cinema.
Yep.
And he hangs around there and sees a lot of people and shakes hands and kisses babies. But he's good for what he's, what he is.
I love that. Love that. We were talking a little bit ago before the break about steeplechase. You've been covering this now for how many years?
Well, let's see. I'm 41 years at the Tennessean, and I started, I think, with the fourth one. So my fourth year in. So was that 36 or 37?
Holy cow.
Yeah, and there's only 85. There's only been 85. So it's amazing that I've covered almost half of them now, which is just amazing to me. But I like it. It gets you away from the sticks and balls. People ask me how I've kept from getting burned out at the Tennessean or just doing, newspaper journalism for 41 years. It's because I've done so many different things, and I've gotten away from the sticks and balls by doing outdoors and NASCAR and Iroquois. It's a change of pace, and I enjoy it. It's just for 1 week out of the year each year, and 25,000 people show up every year. More than that last year. It was standing room only last year, pretty much. So they're doing something right out there. People like it, and if people like it, I like writing about it.
There you go. I mean, it'd be the 85th, like you said, 85th anniversary of this race, and out in Percy Warner Park. Just when you look back at the years you've covered that, obviously there's probably some notable names that come to mind. What kind of sticks out for you?
Well, you never like to see a horse go down and have to be put down. Horses fall a lot. Jockeys fall off a lot. And in my early years, you would see that a lot. Not a lot, but a whole lot more than you see it now. With the advancements they've made on the track out there, they water that thing, and it is perfect every year. And it has nothing to do with the season. You don't have to worry about, we haven't had rain in a month, which like right now, we haven't had much rain lately. Last 2 days, yes. But so, I don't even ask about the track anymore because they have a phenomenal watering system out there, which helps the horses. They don't fall nearly as much, and you see a whole lot fewer get put down. Arcadia was the last one, I think 2011, something like that. So that's one thing I really like, being an animal lover myself. Anybody knows me knows that I'm a big dog person. So I really like that. Big names that have, there's been a lot of celebrities out there over the years. We took a picture one time of Ned Ray McWhorter, who was the I think he was the governor at the time, handing another guy cash. And so he was obviously placing an illegal bet out there, which was just kind of funny. But Titans, a lot of Titans go out there. I've seen many Titans from time to time. And trying to think of anybody else, but people like to go just because it's the rites of spring. And I've always said and I've been there's been 3 or 4 years that I would cover it. I would go just as a spectator.
Sure.
And I kind of call it like going to the lake without the lake. It's people just like to hang out, and there are a lot of people that go out there, never see a horse. They get it, they just go out there to party, and they never even watch a horse.
Yeah,
and
they're on the inside track, just partying
on the inside and the infield. Yeah. So I took a picture of one of our coworkers, Jessica Bliss, one time, who she had been twice before and never seen a horse. So I took her to the edge of the rail as a horse ran by and took a picture of her. So she got to see her first horse that day.
Oh my goodness. As a kid, I was so afraid of horses. And I ended up working at a summer camp and I was like one of the senior camp counselors, and all the kids were just kind of say, "Oh, Mr. Nick, you need to go on the horse." I'm like, I'm not going near a horse. I can't do it.
Well, they're huge animals to start with. And then the walking horses are seem to be 12 twice as big as a regular horse to me.
Yeah.
They are incredible looking animals.
So I was forced to get on a horse at
Oh.
the age of like 19. I know that's pretty late in my age, but like I think the horse's name was Betty. I think that's what it was. A white horse with like they braided the hair on the back, and I'm just like, all right, I'm petrified because I'm like 16 feet up in the air.
Oh yeah.
These horses, they're tall. I'm like,
Yeah.
holy cow. So I can only imagine being a jockey in a race like this. You're going about what, 60, 70 miles an hour, give or take.
Yeah.
I mean, you fall off, like you said, they can get brutally hurt. Yeah.
And they usually fall off when they're over jumps. So they're jumping over either timber or shrubs. So you take that 16 feet, you add another foot or two because the horses are bigger
Yeah.
out there, and then you put them in the air. So now you're up there around 20 feet and you're falling off. That's why a lot of jockeys get injured.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing is they're all small. So, when a smaller person falls, even from a distance like that, it usually doesn't do quite as much damage. You don't have as much weight going down. And so that helps. And they're all in pretty good shape.
Yep.
Even though it always amazes me how many jockeys smoke.
Woo.
They all still smoke. But yeah, it's not a sport for the weak-hearted. It's a tough sport.
Yeah, I'm looking at the printable card right now for the races out at Percy Warner Park at Steeplechase. There's gonna be 7 races from what I see on this card, and there's let's see, the 7th race, the purse is $25,000. The 6th race is $100,000 guaranteed. 5th is $250,000.
There's your big one. There's your
The
that's
5th race.
That's the Iroquois.
Okay.
That's the grade 1 stakes. That's what everybody goes for. It used to be the last race, and they realized that by the last race, everybody was inebriated and nobody stuck around to watch or do what they were seeing if they did stick around. So they moved it up about 4 or 5 years ago to that 3:40 post time.
So when you go to cover this, do you interview some of the jockeys?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're very familiar with this 7th race of the names and whatnot, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The only race that I'll write on will be that 5th race.
Okay. Gotcha.
I'll watch the other races and I'll post. I'll put them on the X, the top 3.
Right.
But that's the only race that I'll write on, and I'll talk to the jockey first, the losing jockey, the owner, and the trainer, and do a story and talk to some people in the crowd. We'll have another reporter there just to do the hats, is what we call it, because everybody wears these crazy hats, mostly the women, but there's some crazy just outfits too. It's a
3-piece suckered suits.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Get you a nice pocket watch to go with it. Some of these names on this list are pretty funny. Ziggle Pops, Swore.
Swore's a favorite.
Yeah. Let's see here. Vape Patron.
Vape Patron is a French horse, local, Leapers Fort.
Really?
Check the owner.
Oh, yeah. I see that. Graham Waters. Okay.
Yeah.
2 of them, actually.
There's 2. There's 4 total.
Yeah.
Swore is local.
Danny Mullins is the other.
Yeah,
other
Danny's local. Yep. And Aban is the returning champ.
Okay.
He won last year. He beat Snap Decision, who had won 3 in a row and was going to be the winningest and wealthiest of all time if he had won last year, and Aban upset him.
So looking at this current 5th race at the Iroquois when it comes to steeplechase, what out of this, I guess, 10 race horses, who do you see could be a good favorite to kind of replicate something like that potentially?
I think Aban is the favorite, and I think Swore is second, and then Fillmore. You see him? Is that I think that's a
Phil Door.
Phil Door.
Yeah.
Phil Door.
Another French horse.
Yeah, another French horse and local, I believe. What is it?
Let's see. Del Rio Racing.
Yes,
LLC.
yes,
Jake
yes.
Cohn.
Yep, he's local. So yeah, the cool thing is that there's so many locals that hopefully we'll have a local winner this year.
Yeah,
it'll either be a local winner or a bond repeating, which makes for a good story either way.
Is it pretty common to see local horses like that?
No, we've gotten away from locals.
Okay,
it used to be a big thing in the up until about the 90s. There was always 2, 3, or 4 local horses, but we've gotten away from local steeplechasing. So it's really good to see 4 in it this year.
Yeah, keep it hyper local for the most part.
Yep.
So yeah, love that. Well, Mike, we'll get into, I guess, a little bit about the school day tournament that's coming up too.
That's my next big thing. My things in the fall or the marathon.
Yep.
And so after we get the marathon done, do Iroquois and then school days. And now before the school days, you have to throw in the NASCAR Cup race at the Super Speedway.
That's right. I mean,
So
you're a busy
I
man.
have 4 big things. Everybody else kind of takes it easy after basketball season. Now, not so with baseball. I covered Vanderbilt for 9 years and never covered baseball in the summer or in the spring. Just there was not much interest, but that's changed. And we now cover Tennessee and Vanderbilt like we cover them in football and basketball in baseball. So it's not like it used to be where everybody coasts. But yeah, I go into the non-sticks and balls sports once we get out of basketball.
Look at you, multi-versatile. I love it. I love every bit of it.
Five tool gear. It was five
tool player.
That's it. There you go.
Yep. Well, we're broadcasting here from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We'll get to more with Mike about school days tournament, the NASCAR race, and other stuff that's coming up at the Speedway as well. Right here on Next Man Up, 102.5 The Game. And fine. Back here on Next Man Up 102.5 The Game. I mean, just countless stories with Mike Organ, man. We're just having a good time in between the break. But, Mike, coming up around the corner is the School Days tournament.
School Days tournament is June 3rd through 5th. And the School Days is an interesting situation in that it's for players ages 12 to 18, girls and boys. Used to be boys only. That's when it's called the School Boy. We added girls in the 80s. It's the longest running golf tournament in the state. This is the 102nd annual. And we'd always get about 220. I think your brother played in it.
Yeah, he did.
We get 220. We'd have to cut it off about 225. I think we've had as many as 240 kids in it. But about, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, we started dropping down into the 50s, the 40s, the 30s. I didn't know what was going on. Well, what had happened is Brant Snedeker, who played 5 times in the School Days, had started the Sneds Tour. Well, to play in the Sneds Tour, you play a tournament either every week or 3 times a month, and you get Sneds points. Well, you can't break away from that because you miss an opportunity to get Sneds points toward the championship.
Right.
So Brant was taking all our players. So Brant heard about it, and Brant and Whit Turnbow, who's the head of the Tennessee Golf Association, they give me $10,000 to help me out with it.
Sure.
And they said, use it however you want. Brant gave $5,000 and the TGA gave $5,000. So we bought better trophies. We put up better signage. We did all kinds of stuff, but we didn't increase players because you still couldn't break away.
Right.
So finally, about 3 years ago, I got to talking with Brant and the pro from McCabe, Lauren Personette, and we said, how about we join your tour?
Yeah.
You don't have a match play. And apparently all young golfers these days like to play everything but conventional rounds. They like to play any other kind of round. So he goes, we're looking for a match play. He goes, that'd be perfect. So we put it on the Sneds Tour 2 years ago. This will be the 3rd year. We're back up to 100, 150 players, and it's thriving. It does really well. And Brett comes out when he can. It's been, obviously, it's in season for him.
Sure.
So it depends on where he is. But, yeah, we're back going strong, and it's out at McCabe. And it'll be this will be the 102nd annual this year.
I love it. And again, those are things in Nashville, especially just in the Tennessee area, that need to continue. It's just when you're very hyper local and you grow up in this market, you want to see things like that continue on. And it's great to hear that it's thriving.
Yeah,
really.
because it got close to, I could have let it go, and it probably, I could have just thrown my hands up and it probably would have gone away. We co-sponsor it with Metro Parks. And so it's the Tennessee and Metro Park School Days Golf Tournament, and that's on the Sneds Tour. And they run it now, and it's top notch. And we added a year. It used to just be through 17. You couldn't be 18 on the day of the tournament.
Right.
We added a year because the Sneds Tour has a year, so that kind of enhanced it a little bit. So now it's 18.
I love that. Well, we've kind of run out of time. If I go any further, I guess Joe Dubin might throw me out this glass window. So I'm going to cut it short here real quick. But Mike, appreciate you coming on the final hour. We got to do this again. This was a blast.
I'd love to. And you said Joe Dubin. I thank you for getting me out of here before he gets here.
Tell me about it.
This was so much better than with Joe, and I look forward to doing it again.
Well, have fun at the steeplechase this weekend, and we'll see you guys all on Monday. Jason McJoe coming up next right here on 102.5 The Game.